What's up, everybody? Welcome to the How to Lead podcast, conversation designed to help you develop yourself and those around you. My name's Adam, joined by Clay. Clay, have you ever been to a Michelin star restaurant?
Gosh.
That you know of?
You're making me feel insecure. I think we went to one in Lisbon, Portugal, but that's the only one I can remember going, we're going to go to this restaurant because of the Michelin star.
Golly, what a humble brag. I wasn't expecting that.
Well, I think probably my insecurity of do I not know one felt like I got to come out with some strong vacation story.
Lisbon, Portugal. That sounds made up, but it also sounds exotic.
Yeah, why did you ask
go
that?
there? Well, because I don't think I've ever been, unless Chipotle is a Michelin star restaurant.
Yeah,
I doubt
have
I've
they
ever
gotten
been
a
to
star
one.
recently? Has it been nominated?
No, I don't think so. They've got a lot of Yelp stars. I don't think it's the
seriously.
same thing. But no, like, here's where I'm going is maybe a stretch. So, like, Michelin is the tire company that
Right.
created this guide years and years and years ago as like this. It's kind of
It is
off-brand
interesting.
for them.
Yeah.
It's just that
Why
they
is
have.
that?
Some would say it's because they wanted to pick these restaurants that were far out in the countryside, so people would drive and wear out their tires.
Oh, wow.
Was one kind of
someone made that guess. Sure.
yeah. But nonetheless, with travel and all that kind of stuff, so it's not uncommon. Here's my connection: not uncommon for some organizations to put out surveys that may at first seem a little bit off, but you dig into it and it's like, well, nonetheless,
Yeah.
Well, Deloitte.
Yeah.
All of our fun accounting friends over there, the big audit and tax practice, they put out a survey every year, just kind of looking at what the rising generation wants out of work. And their most recent survey, the global jobs survey, came out, and they had some very interesting things to say about younger millennials and Gen Z and what they want from their leaders. And so we just picked out 4 insights that we think are relevant for a lot of leaders to talk about. And so that's what we're going to go through today. Just big picture, when you took a look at that survey, what was your thought after, why is Deloitte doing this? What did you think about?
Well, I'll tell you what I thought about is I put it in the subtitle of our podcast episode notes. I don't know if it's going to show up when you clicked on this episode, but the title is What Gen Z and Millennials Really Want from Their Leaders. But in parentheses, I put, and why it's probably not a ping pong table. That was my big takeaway is that if you want to increase the work satisfaction, if you want to grow the work culture at work, it's probably not a ping pong table. But I will say I did have a season of work where I spent an unbelievable amount of time at the ping pong table. And it was kind of surprising that I was able to get my work done. That's assuming that I was able to get my work done, but I was playing a lot of ping pong. So I will encourage you, even though the subtitle says it's probably not a ping pong table, I don't think a ping pong table will hurt anything. I think you can have a great work culture even with a ping pong table. But my big takeaway was it's not one thing, right? It's not there's not some one key takeaway that you go, oh, now I've got to go do this. I really saw when I read through it, I saw it more as to go with the Michelin example. It's really the dashboard of the car.
Yeah.
You got to constantly monitor, the speed I'm going, how much gas do I have? Is the car overheating? There's some things that you got to constantly monitor. And so we tried to extract the 4 big insights, but again, it's not just one of them. You can't just major in one of them. You really got to pay attention to all of these because workers, employees, particularly Gen Z, millennial employees, they're not agreeing that it's just one thing. That it's a myriad of dials.
It really is. Yeah, that's a good insight from all this. So, okay, let's go through this. We're going to talk about 4 of them. We'll just say, hey, here's what Deloitte saw. You and I will talk about our experience, what I'm seeing as I talk through this with my clients and that you talk through with your clients. But number 1, well-being isn't a perk, it's the point. And so this is certainly something we've seen definitely post-pandemic. What younger millennials and Gen Z is bringing to the workplace is mental health, well-being, overall well-being, maybe what Gen Zers and boomers used to call work-life balance. That is the game. That is the main point of being able to do all this. I need work to fit into life, and I need life to be able to fit into work. And the survey just showed that, right? they don't like the anxiety and stress that they're feeling, which like 52% of Gen Zs and 49% of millennials say they feel anxious or stressed most of the time. And if you don't believe that they're bringing that to work, you're going to be sorely mistaken. They are. That is coming to work, and that is that work now. It is a place where we need to talk about that. Right, wrong, or indifferent. I've got my thoughts as to why, but these are conversations at work now.
Yeah, Gen Z and millennials are stressed, and they are not afraid to say it. They're not
That's
afraid
right.
to come out and say it, right? And
Yeah.
there's an expectation, Adam, that the leaders, the managers at the workplace are talking about mental health, but also modeling some sustainable work rhythms.
Yep.
And so, as an employer, if you're someone who does employ Gen Z millennials, and my guess is that's why you clicked on this episode, you're wanting to know, hey, what can I do to manage them better, to work with them better, to attract them better, and also to help them become the best that they can be. You've got to be willing to talk about it. You've got to be willing to model sustainable work rhythms. So one of the things I thought about, have you had a boss? And if not, maybe this could be you, but have you had a boss who's made it okay to not be okay?
Yeah.
I think that's healthy to become
Yeah,
that.
it is. It is. And I think about my experience, and it feels unfair. Like I definitely had a ton of bosses for a decade of my career, but that's when I was working at the church, where just from a spiritual theological perspective, we were
Yeah.
all very comfortable saying I'm not okay.
Yeah,
And so
there's a little
that
more
certainly
attention given to your own personal health.
that's right.
Yeah.
I will say, out in like outside of that nonprofit world in the marketplace, before on staff of the church, that was not really it. We would talk about being tired or stressed sometimes, but nobody was really throwing a pity party for that. But I will say over the last 5 years, being back in the marketplace more full time, I do see a lot of my clients taking that more serious, and that is it's okay. You know, even little things that they talk about from an HR perspective of like the mental health days, mental health awareness week. It is talked about so much more now than when I first started my career, which I think, again, I'm saying all positive. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That we're talking about it, and it's not taboo to. You don't feel like you got to hide it if you're not doing well right now.
Yeah, here's a real practical example. I had a meeting right before coming to hit record on this, and I was meeting with he's probably right on the border of Gen Z millennial. He's a therapist who does really great work. He's got a really good book of business here in the Atlanta area, and I was asking him about what's it like working for his boss, and he was raving about his boss. He's got a Gen Zer that he works for, a Gen Xer that he works for, and he was raving about him. And I said, well, tell me, like, what does he do that you love so much? And he said, if I'm ever running late to work, he'll go ahead and turn the lights on, get the heat going in my office, and he'll just say, hey, no problem. I want you to be ready when you're ready, and, thanks for coming in. I thought, okay, that's a great example where this boss is going, hey, I understand that sometimes things come up. Now, of course, you can't make a habit of doing that, but this guy seemed like a very responsible, really crucial employee for this organization. And so I thought that's a great boss who's willing to admit you're not always going to be okay. You're not always going to be on time, and I'm going to help you out even when you're not. I think that's a really great example of it isn't a perk, it's the point.
Yep, that's good. Okay, this is number 2. They care about climate ethics and the bigger picture. So over 60% of Gen Z and millennials say they've refused to work on or take on projects that conflict with their values, and they want to work with leaders who act like stewards and not just a manager. So, Clay, I feel like this could be a bear trap for us, on some of
Say
this,
more.
with
What do you
stepping
mean?
into it. I mean, I'll say this. I present this material to my clients, and because again, this is what the report is showing.
What the data says,
What
right?
the data says, and I have not had a client that's raised their hand and just said like, that's exactly what we're dealing with here. And so that's one to me that I'm just like, I'm not going to dispute Deloitte's findings, but I just personally, and I haven't worked with everybody, but on the limited clients that I've worked on, have not seen this one being as big of an issue. And so, again, I'm not disputing that it's
Could
a
be
big deal.
regional, could be
Yes,
Texas-based
that's right.
clients, don't care about climate ethics or the bigger picture.
There's your bear trap, okay? And so, no, but what do
No,
you
that's
see
good to
out
admit
there
that, though.
with what you're seeing? Because again, do you hear a lot of people like when you speak somewhere? Do people come up and talk to you about this? Have you ever heard stories about this? What's your experience?
Yeah, that I appreciate that you bring this up because I would agree with you
Yeah.
that I have heard of this being a big deal, but have I actually spoken with someone? That's why I appreciated the way they worded it, that over 60% of Gen Z or millennials say they have refused to work on or take on a project that conflicted with their personal values. So I guess the way I would have said it before the findings is, no, this is something people, a little bit of virtue signaling where people
Yeah.
say they care about it, but it's not actually going to get in the way, which is not what the report says. The report says, no, it is actually getting in the way. So you have to pay attention to it because they are going to refuse to work on things or take on projects that conflict with their values, their personal values or personal interests. But no, I would tend to agree with you. I have not, in my personal experience, I have not seen this as much either. But what I would say, let's figure out, well, how do we figure out what do we need to do about this? I think the big takeaway for me is purpose-driven leadership matters.
Yeah.
That being a leader who is able to identify purpose, recognize that other employees need purpose, and can become the kind of purpose-driven leader that this kind of finding is going to demand, specifically that the future is going to demand. I think it's essential for us as leaders to figure out how do we become that kind of purpose-driven leader.
Yeah. I love the use of the word values because it doesn't make it right or wrong.
That's right.
Values are so personal, relatively subjective. You know, Clay, what you do with an hour of your time that you have extra every day and what I do, they may be different, but they're just a reflection of our values. One is not better than the other. So again, I think they worded that really well. And that's maybe good for a leader that if you have somebody on your team that is refusing to work on a project, not to get into like that argument with them over who's right and who's wrong, and just recognize we have different values and just go, okay, well, hopefully we have plenty of projects and you can work on this client that does this rather than that one, so it doesn't conflict with your values. So yeah, again, just good stuff to note that's out there, and maybe we'll get some good feedback from leaders that are dealing with this, and you can help Clay and I come up with some better ways to share that. So, all right, so well-being isn't a perk, it's the point. They care about climate, ethics, the bigger picture. Number 3, flexibility and belonging beat prestige in perks. And so the younger employees, they prioritize flexibility. I see that all the time.
Yes,
So
yes.
where I'm not seeing some of the other ones, I am seeing the desire and the value for flexibility is huge. They're more likely to leave if they feel unseen. I love the wording of that because it's a feeling.
Yeah.
And so this is really simple for leaders on daily check-ins, which we can get into in a second. And career growth isn't just about titles. We're going to get into this here in a moment, but it's a little bit more about autonomy, freedom, and meaning.
Yeah.
So I thought that was some good things, right?
Yeah, I see this as well, that, oftentimes a lot of the content that I bring to an organization is driven by the assumption that people want to move up in their career or move up in the organization. And this has been really challenging for me because what I have, both my personal experience of working with organizations, but also the data from this survey that Deloitte has done, has reinforced the idea that people don't necessarily want to move up. They're not looking to get the promotion, to get their boss's job, if it means that they sacrifice flexibility and sacrifice belonging.
That's
right? They want to be in a job that allows them to be flexible and to have that sense of belonging. I love the way that it's put here, and I say that because we put it this way, but the flexibility and belonging, they outpace prestige and perks, right? They beat prestige and perks. So I think here's one thing we can do about this. Let's say you're still, I'm amazed at how many organizations are still fighting the we want you to come back to the office thing, right? You're welcome to put out a mandate that says everybody has to come back to the office, but you have to make space for, you might lose a percentage of your workforce if you do that, right?
Yeah.
And that's okay. If you're able to afford that and you believe that it's important enough to do that, then go for it, right? But you got to be aware that flexibility and that sense of belonging are so crucial to what millennials and Gen Zers really want.
Yeah, it's great. I think this is one where it's like the Xers and Boomers, we probably need to recognize that there's more than one way to get up the mountain. You can manage if you're managing outcomes and not managing inputs and all the little steps, not micromanaging all the ways people are getting stuff done. If you're just managing whether or not they got it done, I think you can allow people to have some flexibility. It makes it a little bit more challenging for you as a leader, because this means if they don't meet deadlines, they don't get things done well, you've got to have awkward coaching conversations. But nonetheless, I think it's really good to know that that flexibility is massive. It is massive right now. And I don't think it's going anywhere. You know, we've talked about that, like with coaching. Is this just a fad, or is this going to be around? I think this is a fundamental shift. Like, everything nowadays is on your schedule. And I'll blame TiVo. Like, TiVo changed it all for us as we started to learn, I can watch TV shows whenever I want to. And then it just has spiraled from there. So this is what we're used to. It's just flexibility when it's time for us. Okay, let's do the last one here real quick. I love the way you summarize this, that growth is the new loyalty. Growth is the new loyalty. Gen Zs and millennials, they're loyal to opportunity, not just organizations, Clay. I think that's very insightful. Over half say they've left roles due to lack of development or career progression. So if they feel like it's a dead-end job, over half have said that they've left, and they want leaders who mentor, challenge, and invest in their potential.
Yeah.
Again, we've done a lot of episodes on coaching recently that would reinforce that, so maybe that's why we like this. But what really stood out to you there?
Well, yeah, it reinforces what you and I do for work, right?
Yeah.
That organizations need to make an investment in their workforce. And it doesn't, the way you make an investment, it's not just paying them more, and it's not just the ping pong table. But it is in opportunities to grow, right? And opportunities to grow doesn't just mean bringing in a speaker or doing a book club. It might be letting somebody manage a project before they're ready to manage that project. But again, this might this might feel a little contrary to what we just talked about, that they're not necessarily, the number one thing is not looking to get promoted. So make sure to be able to differentiate an opportunity for a promotion versus an opportunity to learn and grow, right?
Yeah.
They're not necessarily looking for an opportunity to get promoted, but they are looking for an opportunity to learn and to grow. And that's important to be able to make that distinction.
Yeah.
I love the idea of a manager reading this going, all right, what am I doing to invest in the men and women that work for our team? I think that's really important for you to be able to figure that out, because they clearly want to be invested in. They want opportunities to not just learn, but they want opportunities to learn and grow.
Yep. Two things here that come to my mind. And so one of them will be a plug for our services, Clay, because I see this a lot.
Right.
I always, when I get asked to come in and host a leadership development workshop, either on the edge for young leaders or the one that we do more for the newer to middle managers, I want to see lives change. I want to see leaders get better. I want outcomes that are going to be there's going to be behavior changes. That's what I try to put together, and that we at PeopleWorks try to do. And I also know that just us showing up and hosting an engaging workshop is a win, because for the organization, they get to say, look, we brought in outsiders.
Yep.
Look, we brought in Clay. Look, we brought in Adam or Matt, and we did this whole program for you, and that is a win. So that's one thing that comes to mind. So that is one thing as a leader of a team that you can do, is just to put some more formal development opportunities on the calendar for people. Let them get away from the office for a few days. All that stuff matters. It feels important, and that's a big deal to feel important. Number two, the simple thing I see clients doing is just career mapping, where they are just going, here is how you progress through our organization. Almost like they've turned a career at your company into a video game, and they've said, here's how you climb up. And are there exceptions? Of course. There's always ways you can kind of skip a step or go faster, but there's just something about that map, especially for younger leaders, that's just like, okay, now I know where I stand. And,
that's right. And I know what I need to do to get to the next level.
That's right. That's right.
That's so helpful.
So that, I think, candidly, is harder for smaller companies, because
for sure.
Everybody wears so many hats, or if you're in a startup phase, that's just different. But those are a couple of things that I've seen that
it might
really tap into that.
Because of our limited perspective, Adam, we might be a little biased to this one, but I was thinking about the organizations that I work with are typically growing organizations. And you wonder, it's a little like chicken and the egg, which came first.
Yeah.
Were they growing and so they were able to invest in others? Or is it because they invest in others, in their employees, that's where they're growing?
Yeah.
And I don't know the answer to that, but I just booked a speaking engagement with an organization called the Community Bank of Indiana. They've gone from one to several locations in just the last few years. And it was fascinating to hear about how much they care about the growth of the men and women that work for them, which is why they take a couple of federal holidays. I think it's President's Day and Veterans Day. I don't remember the others that they use. When their bank is already closed and they go, these 3 days throughout the year, we take those days and we make them opportunities for people to grow. We bring in speakers, we put on programs, we do things for our employees on those days because our bank is closed anyway. I thought that was a very strategic and thoughtful way to handle those federal holidays as a bank that is going to be closed anyway. And they're growing. They're growing because, and again, I don't know, are they growing because they're investing, or are they investing in because they're growing? I don't know which comes first, but those are typically the organizations that you and I end up working with and getting perspective on.
Yeah, I love it. So those are the 4 big insights from that report. Again, Deloitte makes it available for free. You can go Google that and find it. Maybe we can put a link in the show notes to that as well. But I think for most business leaders, these are some really relevant points. And so if you're leading anybody under the age of 40 right now, am I creating a culture that supports well-being? Am I allowing people to live out their values, or do I have strategies for when there's a conflict there? Am I offering real flexibility? And then more importantly, maybe over all of this, am I creating loyalty through growth? Those are some great questions to ask. I think you start pulling those levers, you're going to see a real uptick and a lot of positive things happen.
Yeah, that's great. I love this episode. I love those 4 things. Again, some of them we've seen, some that we haven't, but it does you no good to not look at this. It will only help you as a leader to pay attention to this. Data-driven. Thanks, Deloitte, for doing it. I will say Deloitte doing a survey around workforce is a little more consistent than Michelin doing one around restaurants. So shout out to Deloitte for doing it.
And Michelin, you can send an email to clay.scroggins.
gmail.com. That's right.
All right. Good to be with you, Clay.
Thanks, Adam.
Well, that's all we got for today's episode of the How to Lead podcast. You can always reach out to us via email. We can be reached at info@howtolead.work. That's info@howtolead.work. Every episode is mixed and edited by the team over at Sound of a Rose. You can learn more about them at soundofarose.com. Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk to you again next time.